Hello everyone and welcome to this week's tutorial. Today we're going to be doing part 2 of the crochet rings tutorial that we started last week. We're going to be starting simple and then we're going to end up with something a little zany, as after all it's party season here in Europe, and what better time to whip up something fun and a little different for your next event. So for our first variation of these rings, we're going to start the flower with a magic ring. So if you want a more detailed explanation of the magic rings, then I'll put a link to my tutorial in the description. But I've gone over the concept very briefly in this tutorial just to help you along. So form your magic ring and then do 6 single crochets into your magic ring. Once you've done those 6 stitches, you want to pull the short thread to make your stitches form a circle. But don't pull the circle all the way closed. You want to still have that small hole in the base of your flower. This is so you can fit the pistil in later. So once you've done your 6 stitches, you pulled it tight to form pull it into a circle, Then you slip stitch your last stitch to your first stitch, and that will form the rest of the circle, and then you chain 1 to move up to your next round. So for round 2, in the second chain from the hook, so in other words ignoring the chain that you made to move up a row, your first stitch of the actual stitches, you do 1 single crochet. In your next stitch you're going to do 2 single crochet into the same stitch. That means you're going to be increasing by 1 stitch, and then you just follow in the stitch pattern. So you go 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochet into the following one. So carry on around, and then you should end up with 9 stitches by the time you've got to the end of round 2. Is now for rounds 3 and 4, you're going to be doing 1 single crochet into each stitch. So there's no more increases. You'll continue to have 9 stitches per round. The easiest way to do this is just to single crochet for 18 stitches going around in a spiral. You don't need to chain up between each round anymore. You can just continue in a spiral. So just single crochet 18 stitches, so that's twice around. You should end up with 4 rounds of stitches. And then when you finish that, just cut your thread from the ball and tuck your ends in. And by tuck your ends in, I mean tuck the short end in, and then you're going to leave one longer piece, about 15 centimeters. Usually this piece that you started your magic circle with will be long enough for this, but make sure that you've got enough to stitch your ring onto the ring base, your flower onto the ring base. So make sure you've got enough thread for that. So I find it easier to use a hook size, one size smaller than the hook I make my work with. to tuck the ends of the thread in. It's just easier to get in amongst your stitches if your hook size is slightly smaller than what you started with. In this case, I'm using a 1.5 hook, and I made the flower with a number 2 hook. In part 1, we went through 2 different styles of ring band. For the rings today, I'm using the horizontally stitched ring band. So that's 18 stitches, doing 4 rows of stitches. Okay, to start our pistil, we're going to hook our, in my case I'm using yellow thread for my pistil, which you can do any color you like, of course, into the middle stitch of the ring band. I usually work where I join the 2 sides of the ring band together to make the ring. So I'm going to do a short stemmed pistil today. So for that we do chain 4. So chain 4. Then you wrap your yarn over your hook. You push your hook through the 3rd chain from the hook, yarn over again, pull through that stitch, then yarn over and pull through 2 stitches. You'll now be left with 2 loops of yarn on your hook. And you do this again 3 more times, going back into the same stitch. So you'll end up with 5 loops of thread, all coming from that same one stitch that you're working on in your chain. Then you go yarn over and you pull through all 5 loops that are on your hook, and then you chain 1. Now, if you look at the bottom of that little cluster of stitches that you've just made, you'll see there's a little loop of thread there. You want to slip stitch into that loop of thread. That will make a nice little ball of stitches. And then you're going to slip stitch into that last stitch of the chain, the stem, yeah. And then you're going to slip stitch back into the ring band itself. So this is a nice small compact little pistil that's going to fit inside the little flower that you've made. Then you're going to cut your thread from the ball and tuck your thread ends to the inside of the ring band, and then tie yourself a little granny knot and tuck your ends in nice and neat. Okay, to finish your flower, you're going to push your pistil through that little hole that you left in the base of your flower from when you started. It can be quite tricky to get it through that little hole, so just be careful that you don't pull on any of the stitches as you get pushing it through. It can be helpful to use a crochet hook to get them through, and then once it's all through and in place, then you use that long tail of thread that you left on your flower base. You're going to use that to stitch the flower base to the ring band. That's the first of our variations for today. See, it's a nice simple little ring that you can make for slightly more conservative. Okay, we're going to step it up a notch, and we're going to start we'll start in the same manner, but we're going to make our ring base a little bit bigger, so we've got more stitches to work with. So again, we're going to start with the magic circle, single crochet 6 into that circle, and then slip chain 1 to move up to our second round, And then our second round, we're going to do one increase stitch on every second stitch. So in other words, that's one single crochet into the first stitch, and then in the next stitch you're going to do 2 single crochet into the same stitch, and then just continue around. By the end of this round, you should be left with 9 stitches. Our third round of stitches, we're just going to do 1 single crochet into each stitch. So you'll still have 9 stitches at the end of this third round. So our fourth round of stitches is essentially the same as our second round of stitches, in that we're going to single crochet into the first stitch, and then in the next stitch you're going to do 1 increase, which means you're going to be doing 2 single crochet into the same stitch. So repeat this pattern around, 1 single crochet into the next, and then 2 into the following one, until you end up with 15 stitches going all around your circle. And then for your next round, your fifth round, you're again going to just do 1 single crochet into each stitch. So you'll end up again with 15 stitches for that round. So a handy little trick to make your own stitch marker is just to use a piece of thread or wool of a different color and leave that in place, so you know, because it's easiest to do these flowers working on a spiral as opposed to going up ring by ring. So use a little piece of alternative colored thread to help you with that. So once you've completed round 5, do a slip stitch for your last stitch. That's just to make sure there's no big step down from your, on the edge of your stitches. It'll just help to ease them into a nice round circle. And then cut your thread from the ball and tuck your ends in. Just pull the thread that you're going to be using to stitch your flower to the base. Pull it through so that it comes out the bottom hole and doesn't get in your way while you're forming your petals. So for my petals, I've chosen to do them in a light pink color. We're going to join our thread to any of the stitches on the round. By that, just hook it through, and then you start your chain. We're going to chain 3. Then we're going to slip stitch into the next chain on the flower base, next stitch on the flower base. So really are going stitch by stitch. We're doing 3 chain in between. So we slip stitch on, then we chain 3 again, and then we slip stitch back onto the chain base. Continue around and you should end up with 15 petals going around. Just remember to join your last petal to the base of the first petal. So you shouldn't see any purple or any of your original flower base color showing through on that round of stitches. You should only see the petals going around. Then when you finish that, you want to just cut your thread ends and leaving 5 centimeter tail, and then just tuck them in as you have before. flower, we're going to be doing a pistil through this for the center of the flower. This one I've chosen to do a slightly more long stemmed pistil. And for this one I'm also doing, because I'm doing a long stem, I've chosen to use the smallest hook possible. This just gives a bit more sturdy structure to our pistil. So for this we're going to chain 6, and then we're going to work our popcorn cluster stitch as we did for the first variation. Working into that chain 6 that we've just made, you're going to yarn over, go into the third stitch from the hook, yarn over, pull through your that stitch, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and then you'll be left with 2 loops on your hook. And then you continue again, you go yarn over, back through the same stitch in the chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, you're left with 3 stitches. Repeat this until you've got 5 loops of thread on your hook, and then you're going to chain 1, and that'll be the completion of your cluster. Okay, and then if you look at that there's a little thread at the base of the cluster of stitches that you just made. You're going to slip stitch onto that thread, and then you're going to slip stitch down the last 3 stitches of your initial chain that you started with, and then you're going to slip stitch back into the same stitch on the ring band where you started your pistil from. And then exactly the same as you did in your first variation, you're going to shove your little pistil through that hole in the flower base that you left there, and stitch your base securely onto the ring to finish your flower off. Gives you a nice flower with very sweet little petals. If you want to do something with slightly bigger petals, then you need to look at tutorial 1 of the crochet rings that we did, and that'll give you the petals for this blue ring. And things start to get lots of fun. So you can either start with a flower base that we did in variation 2 of this tutorial, or you can look at the tutorials the rings that we did in the first part of this tutorial, whereby we make a crochet circle. So to do that, I'm just gone over it briefly quickly here. You wrap the crochet thread around your fingertip 10 to 20 times, depending on how thick your thread is, and then you want to single crochet over these wraps of thread. You want to end up with an even number of stitches going around. It's really important for your petals. I've done 24 stitches, so then I'll end up with 12 petals. Okay, so instead of the petals that we did in the second variation of this ring, we're going to be using pistils as the petals. So to do this, we're going to hook our new color thread through any of the stitches on the circle, and you're going to chain 6. And then you can continue just as we did for the other pistils. So you're going to yarn over, then push your hook through the third chain from the hook, yarn over again, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 stitches. You'll be left with 2 stitches on your hook. And then you want to repeat this another 3 times so that you end up with 5 loops of thread on your hook at the end, when you've done your cluster. And then you're going to yarn over, pull through all of these 5 loops, and then chain 1. And then just as we did before, you're going to slip stitch into that little loop of thread at the bottom of your cluster of stitches, and then you're going to slip stitch down the next 3 stitches of the chain, the initial chain that you made, going back to the ring base. Sorry, the crochet circle that you made. Now, instead of slip stitching back into the initial stitch where we started, like we've done with all the other pistils, you're going to slip stitch into the stitch next to the one you started from, and then you're going to slip stitch again into the next stitch, and then start your next pistil. So between each pistil there'll be 2 slip stitches, and this way you'll end up with 12 pistil style 12 pistil style petals by the time you've finished your flower. So instead of just doing short stem pistils, which you can do in the center of your flower, I just want to show you a different method using a 5 chain picot stitch. So in order to do that, you are going to attach your central color. In this case I've used yellow, and then you're going to chain 5. Then you're going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain from that hook, from your hook. I've just gone through one of those loops. You can go through one or both, it's up to you. It doesn't change the effect all that much. And then you're going to chain 2 and then slip stitch back into the ring base, either in the stitch you started from or in the stitch right next to it. And you're going to do this again. I usually do about 5 of these together in a cluster, and it just forms 5 little stamens for the middle of your flower. You're going to finish this flower just as you have all your other ones by using your thread tail to stitch the crocheted circle onto the ring band. That's that for this week's crochet ring tutorials. Next week we'll be doing some crochet pendants, so I hope you'll join me for that. If you like this video, please click on the like button and please consider subscribing to my channel so that you don't miss out on any future tutorials. Thanks for watching.